fallibilism, relativism, doctrines, religious people. I, I don't I don't care what you call them. To me, it's all the same thing. The one thing that fallibilism does, which I think it leaves one door open, that is the powerful key to progress, and that is error correction. Error correction, or in the lingo that we use here at Orange Capital Partners, iteration, lowering the cost of iteration, making try and error not just sort of an unwelcome thing in the process, but this is the process. That is the key of fallibilism. That's why we have David Deutsch as a writer, his book, The Beginning of Infinity, as part of our principle stack, and that's why we think is so important. I get asked often, why do you care about epistemology? What is this, some sort of pet project of yours? And it's not. This is our business. We're in the hedge fund business. We're in the wealth creation business. We're in the innovation stack business. We're in the business of figuring out a way to start from a problem and then building up an innovation stack, which is another word for solving problems, creating new problems, solving problems, creating new problems. So this is our business. And fallibilism is at the core of that. But my point is that the line, the demarcation line between fallibilism and all these other doctrines, whatever it is, let's say, take Lenin. He was a doctrinist. Why didn't he win? Well, it's because he didn't allow for error correction. So error correction, iteration, that is the key. This is not even wrong podcast. It's September 24th, 2021. This is Crim Delco. For the day, the fund is down 46 basis points. The market is up 20 basis points. For the year, we are up 12.9%. The market's up 19.2%. We're underperforming by 6.3%. So again, fallibilism is the philosophical, epistemological idea of starting with the premise that there is something to be wrong about. You can make mistakes. You are trying to pursue the path towards truth, and you're going to make mistakes. And the key is to have better explanation, objective explanations on this path towards truth. This is fallibilism. So you start with the idea that, look, you're going to make mistakes. Actually, mistakes are part of the process. And that's opposed to relativism, which is about subjective truths, and doctrinism, which is about one truth and sort of the path towards that truth, and then religious sort of sidelines of doctrinism, which is kind of all the same thing. There's a truth, and you just follow that truth. There's right and wrong, and there's value systems that are static, and all those types of things. And of course, fallibilism already has one big fundamental problem, which is, well, you are telling me that you are starting with the premise of there could be an error. So couldn't fallibilism be an error on its own? How can you improve that? Can you improve on fallibilism itself? And that's, of course, one of the big questions. And that's where I was sort of entangled recently a little bit by myself and with others thinking about this problem. And here's how I think about this. I think fallibilism needs some improvement, because fallibilism is on a bit of a thin ice sheet, because in my view, it almost runs the risk of a tautology. It says that you start with the premise of we don't know the truth, but we can get there, and we're going to get there by making mistakes and correcting those mistakes. And the way we correct mistakes is by finding better explanations, objective explanations towards the path of truth. And I just have my concerns here, because by assuming there's such a thing as objective explanations, you're already in a tautology spiral here relative to relativists, because they will say, well, there's no such thing as objectivism. So that's already a problem. The doctrinists will say, well, fine, maybe you just don't get it, because I get it. And because you're telling me already that you assume that you can make errors, you're just a weak person, because I'm a strong person. I'm the guy or the person who knows what's right. So in both of these battles, you are, I would say, on the back burner here. But what is the weapon that fallibilism has? And I think that's why we made it as part of our principal stack, so clearly we are we're abiding to it, or we believe in it, or I don't know what the right word is, but we are definitely going along with this idea. The reason we go along with this idea is because it leaves the door open for error correction. Now, in modern parlance, it is an idea that says, let's compete for the better explanation. And this is, I think, where we think, sort of following Popper here, error correction in terms of actually improving Popper himself is, why don't we just call, instead of falsifying theories and things like that, which have been, I think, misused, those words have been used too much and they lose their meaning. Why don't we just call it the liquid marketplace where ideas compete? Let's just call it the way it is. Ideas compete in a marketplace. And this is where we live at Orange Capital Partners. Now, we're based in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley, to me, is the instantiation of Popperism, of David Deutschism, of Fallabilism, whatever ism you want to name. Silicon Valley is the actual practical, real instantiation of that idea. Here's what I mean with this. I think fundamentally, first and foremost, practically, Silicon Valley actually really goes to the scientific community, fishes for ideas, turns them into technology and services through technology innovation, things like that, companies, venture capital, instantiates them into products and services, and then sells them to the people. So lets people vote. So in that sense, Silicon Valley is the ultimate Popperian machine. The reason Silicon Valley has been able to generate so much wealth is because Silicon Valley is a condensed form of capitalism. What capitalism has done since the 17th century, which is exactly the same thing, building innovation stacks around concepts and then turning them into engineering practices and services and products. That's what capitalism has done. Wealth generation was sort of a side product of it. What really mattered is that because capitalism has this inert error correcting mechanism in it, it has also helped propel science, knowledge, and all these other things. So, in other words, yes, we had a massive wealth creation in the last 300 years, no question about that. But what we had even more is knowledge creation. We created knowledge not just in technology terms. Of course, there we've created an enormous amounts of knowledge. Think about the iPhone versus the printing press, versus think about SpaceX versus the ship that Columbus. Think about the Model T versus Tesla, and so on and so forth. So there's no question about the instantiation of knowledge created in the scientific community through technology and Silicon Valley entrepreneurs and things like that. Again, it has created wealth. People were better off, all of us, not just the people who have invested in those technologies, but also everybody else, because you have the ability to consume products and services that are many, many orders of magnitude better and also cheaper. So that's how wealth is generated for everybody. Now, what really matters for this conversation from the epistemological point of view is that Silicon Valley is also the driving horse of fallabilism. Why? Because it allows for a liquid marketplace of ideas. You will be hard-pressed to find somebody in Berkeley or Stanford and any other university which considers itself kind of close to that type of institution. You will be very hard pressed to find relativists or doctrinists in those places, at least in the technological departments. And I have to be very, very careful here, of course, when it comes to Berkeley. But in the technical departments, so computer science, engineering, you'll be very hard pressed. Why? Because those people have been exposed to a massive amount of try and error, competition, error correction, and so on and so forth. I had another experience, maybe if I may just to introduce here. I myself started my career actually as a trader on Wall Street. And you can have your opinions about Wall Street, I don't care about that. But the one thing a trader does on Wall Street, he or she is continuously exposed to the market. There's no such thing as being right or wrong. There's only I'm right or wrong relative to the market. So there is, again, this continuous error correction. There's no such thing as me having some sort of my own subjective ideas. There's no such thing as, of course, doctrine doesn't work in the marketplace at all. The only thing that works is you do something and then you see if it works or not. And then I had this, I had a conversation with a person that was a consultant, a McKinsey consultant. And what struck me in that conversation is that this person was very doctrinistic. So there was a knowledge, a certain, I would say McKinsey people are probably justificationists because they claim that whatever they know is right because they come from a place of prestige. So in that sense, they're justificationists. But there was a big clash and that meeting didn't go well, and et cetera, et cetera. Why didn't it go well? And I thought to myself after the meeting, I was very young back then. Of course, I haven't read David Deutsch, any of that stuff. Popper, I read a little bit. I did attend Feyerabend classes at my undergrad in Zurich. So I had some idea of epistemology, but still I was not in any way equipped to really process this from a position of, oh, well, I know what's going on. I was like, what's going on here? I was asking myself what's going on here. And my conclusion was, well, look, I'm a trader. I cannot afford to be a justificationist, doctrinist, relativist, none of that stuff. I just can't afford. Maybe it's a nice place to be, because if you're a consultant a la McKinsey, you walk into a place, you give your opinion, and you walk out, and there's no way to make you accountable for anything, because no matter what happens, if it works out, of course you're the genius. If it doesn't work out, then you didn't implement it right, or well, of course it was the market, or it was my advice was correct, but you guys forgot to China as a competitor. We didn't think about that, but that's irrelevant. So again, I think the point here is what I'm trying to bring across here is that what's really powerful about fallibilism is not fallibilism itself. I think fallibilism is a weak theory because it has a bad name. It starts with a negative fallibilism. It just has a negative connotation. But more importantly, it's based on, in my view, fragile arguments such as good explanations. The word good is not a good, well, okay, there I go. The word good is just not strong enough in my view for something that needs to be, that is so important, like sort of the idea of how we actually think. But even though it's weak, even though it has its drawbacks, there's one big thing, and that is that it leaves the door open for error correction. So if we can transform anywhere where fallibilism is practiced and there's a liquid market for ideas, fallibilism works. So in a sense, fallibilism is just another word for I am open to compete in a marketplace. And that, it might sound, well, yeah, what's the big deal? This is a big, big deal. This is, in my career, I have yet to meet people, I can count them on my hands, people that are genuinely open to compete for ideas. It is a very inhuman thing to do. So fallibilism, and I want to rephrase that now, for me, fallibilism is not about error correction or absolutely not about good explanations and all that stuff. It's not, because that's weak. What's strong about fallibilism is the question, are you open to compete? Are you ready to walk into the ring and fight? Fight for your idea, fight for your conviction, and most importantly, and this is where the rubber meets the road, can your ideas be in any way or form be instantiated into some sort of product and service or technology so we can go and test it in the marketplace? Now, this can be a Tesla car, this can be an Apple iPhone, or it can be a slit experiment for quantum physics. It can be an experiment in physics. It doesn't have to be a consumer product. I don't want to come across as a sort of, whatever the word would be, entrepreneurist or something. So somebody just said, well, anything which can't be turned into business is not worth it. That's not what I mean. What I just mean is that if you have an idea, if fallibilism only works if somehow you can instantiate your knowledge into something tangible so you can go and test it. And this is what Popper said. I'm just rephrasing what Popper said here. I think that's what Popper meant. He just, he was 100 years ago, and in those days, the lingo was different. Today, he would say, I just need to have theories that can be instantiated in the marketplace. That's the way I see it. So this makes me comfortable, because now I'm comfortable. And I had an episode, I think a few days ago, where I spoke about free will and not free will, and it's the same thing. I don't care free will or not free will. I couldn't care less what you call it. What matters to me is that you have the ability to react to your environment. You can compete with your environment. If somebody walks to me and starts a fight, I don't care if I have free will or not. I don't care if I'm Sam Harris or David Deutsch. What I really care about is, am I going to use MMA, or am I going to use a gun, or am I going to run away, or what am I going to do? This is free will. And you can call it whatever else you want. To me, this is me making a creative choice about a solution that I have a problem. And I can extrapolate from there. So again, I think our progress as a human race on this planet Earth depends on how much competition we can create in any field. And if we can create competition in the field of knowledge, I think we get the biggest bang for the buck. Because knowledge creation, this is all David Deutsch now, and I completely agree, knowledge creation has an incredible impact on life, on Earth, on the planet, on the universe. But knowledge can only be created if there's competition. Otherwise, it's going to be stuck. I'm just reading Lenin's biography, one of them, a good one. I'm going to review the book, so let's not go into detail now. It's a Lenin biography by a gentleman that has been very close to the Soviet Union, etc. And what comes across, and I'm probably 1/3 through the book, it's one of those 1,000-page type books. I think we're about 1907 now, so we're still 10 years away from the actual October Revolution. But what comes across is Lenin was an unbelievable doctrinist. For him, doctrine was everything. So in a sense, Lenin was just like another pope or another to come Hitler or Stalin, who was obviously the successor of Lenin. There was no error correction, trying to find better solutions for problems, none of that. There was a solution, which is bring down the Tsars and get to power, and that's it. And however else you do that, it doesn't matter. And by the way, they were very unsuccessful for that particular reason until World War I hit, and then things turned their way, I would say, more out of luck than anything else. So, I'm sorry for this digression to Lenin. My point here is, again, you have Fallabilism and Popper and David Deutsch and all these other things which come to life in the beginning of infinity, from my perspective, only have relevance in the real world if we can create liquid markets. And that has two massive implications, I think, for somebody like me who runs a hedge fund. Of course, first and foremost, there is more or less, there's no other way to run a hedge fund than to operate in liquid markets. So this is more subtle than maybe a lot of people might think, because there's a lot of people in the hedge fund business that actually like the opposite, and I think that is an oxymoron. So you want to be in liquid markets, not because it's some sort of moral good thing to do or anything like that. It's just that's the only way to make money. More importantly, the second thing is that you can only create something of substance. You can create something that prospers and generates liberty, which is another word for wealth. For us, liberty and wealth are almost fungible expressions. You can only do that in a process of innovation stack type creation, and innovation type creation depends on error correction on marketplaces where errors can be corrected. So the whole conversation about fallibilism, the whole conversation about relativism, and all these things, to me, are not the real story. The real story starts and ends with the question, is there a marketplace? If you have a marketplace for your ideas, I predict you will get to better solutions, objectively better solutions. This is what David Deutsch would say, without having to Wittgenstein yourself through what is the meaning of objective and is there such a thing and all that. You don't need that, because objective solutions win in the marketplace. This is what markets do. Markets take the subjectivity out of the judgment process. Lastly, I want to say one more thing, and this is unfortunately a bit of a concern, and here's the concern. So I just said that markets take the subjectivity out of judgment. Knowledge creation depends on objective explanations. Fallibilism is the process of error correct your way towards better solutions. I've said all of these where I agree with David Deutsch, and I just think we need to emphasize a little bit more the marketplace aspect of things. But here's my concern. There are big ideas. There are sometimes ideas and theories and knowledge that we have today where we just don't have the luxury, first and foremost, to engage in this fallibilism, relativism conversation. We don't have the luxury of that, and more importantly, we can't error correct. We can error correct, maybe, but the problem is when the error happens, we're destroyed. An example would be a very actually mundane example is the following concept or theory or idea, whatever you want to call it, which is that reckless money printing by central banks will lead to war. This is a prediction I'm happy to make. Reckless money printing will lead to war. That's it. That's a prediction I'm absolutely happy to make. The problem is, like I say, if I have to test this, I'm going to end up in war. So if I'm right, which I'm pretty sure I am, I'm going to end up in war. So this is one of those things where I wish I had a way to stop this before it happens. If my way of testing a theory is disaster, well, I don't want to be in this position. So can you give me a better solution for that? This is an open question for all of the thinkers out there. Fallibilism only works with competition and testing and error correction, but if certain ideas, and I want to throw in other ideas, maybe climate change is one of those, although that's a bit of a controversial project, but let's leave climate change out of the conversation here, but let's think about just conceptually about a problem that we have a solution for. So we have a theory, we're correcting an error, and that error prevents humanity to get into a situation where we end up in a nonlinear, chaotic process that destroys the world. Same could be applied to the question of AI and AI safety. So again, we can't error correct the theory or the idea of is AI safe or not, because if we're wrong, i.e. if AI actually turns out to be a very dangerous technology, then it's too late. So we get into the singularity, Bostrom, and all that. So how can we find a basis of conversation? I think this is something, this is now very Popperian, like I want to error correct. I think the conversation today is not good enough. We need better solutions for conversations where we can find solutions before we go to the error correction process, because sometimes error correction means disaster and that it's too late. This would be my sort of appel to the thinking community. But to summarize this particular episode, as far as Orange Capital Partners is concerned, what's really important is that error correction, David Deutsch, fallibilism, all of these things, they're great things only in places where there is competition. Competition is the key to all of these things. And the great thing about fallibilism is that it opens the door for competition. Thank you.